Well, welcome everyone to National Inclusion Week. Diversity in Maritime is united for inclusion. My name is Clarke and I'm the Head of Diversity and Operations at Maritime UK, and we're very grateful to Aberdeen Harbour Board and Stena Line for sponsoring the programme. We are delighted to be hosting our first intersectional webinar today, bringing together our mental health and pride networks with some fabulous guests. We'll hear from each of our panellists and there'll be an opportunity for Q&As at the end. And for anyone in our virtual audience, please do feel free to use the Q&A function, and the session will be recorded and shared later. In March 2021, we called upon the maritime sector to make a public commitment to improving mental health provisions for their employees. We're delighted that this pledge is continuing to grow, but the pledge is just one step, and we need to ensure that maritime is welcoming for all. Our panellists today will be sharing lived experiences and practical solutions. And I'm delighted to introduce Vaughan, who is the Vice Chair of our Mental Health and Maritime Network, Laura Schofield, Project Manager and PRISM Network Representative from Jacobs, McGowan, the Chair of our Pride and Maritime Network, and Buczek, who is the Chair of our Retention and Progression Working Group. I'm going to call upon Caitlin to start first, and then we'll hand each of our panellists. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Chrissie. Really delighted to be collaborating with the Pride Network today. Conversations around mental health, obviously significant to everyone, especially across our diversity networks. So my name's Caitlin and I'm the Vice Chair of the Mental Health and Maritime Network. Previously, I worked at ICE1 when I first joined the network, the International Seafarers Welfare and Assistance Network, and had a particular focus on seafarers and long-term changes to improving well-being and welfare there. I'm now at Lloyd's Register Foundation as a project and stakeholder engagement manager. The Mental Health and Maritime Pledge is a pivotal step forward, but as Chrissie's mentioned, it's the first start, and we're committed to listening and understanding how to support the mental health and well-being of our LGBT plus employees. So today we're really delighted to be joined by Laura, who's a project manager at Jacobs and PRISM Network representative. We want to learn how other similar sectors are supporting their LGBT plus employees, and we're really grateful to Laura for sharing her lived experiences with us today. We're looking forward to also hearing from Danny McGowan, Chair of the Pride and Maritime Network, and Barbara, from Chair of Retention and Progression Working Group, who has some experience in this area. So thanks a lot, and looking forward to hearing from you, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Chrissie, thank you, Caitlin, and thank you all very much for having me, inviting me along to talk to you. I'm a non-binary trans woman. I transitioned eventually, very long story, which I can go into a little bit, but ultimately transitioned at work about 6 years ago. So a bit about me. I'm married with kids. And I had kids, and they were young when really the issues I had with gender really came to the surface, and I realized that I really was transgender and needed to do something about it when married with a young family, and spent several years with nobody at work knowing anything about that. But got to the point where I thought my mental health was starting to suffer. So I'd always felt quite kind of I struggled to really connect with people as on more than a superficial level, and I think it just affected me in so many ways, not being able to fully be myself, fully bring my whole self to work. So at the time, I was seconded into the Thames Tideway Tunnel project. Big project office, lots of people. I felt it was a supportive environment. There was a network. There wasn't any other transgender people that I knew in the organisation. However, you know, I'm going to have to take the step and reach out. So I reached out to human resources and manager and looked how it happened, how I could come out of work, and you know, it was much better than I thought it might be. You know, coming out in comes is the daunting lot of work in terms of communicating with different groups of people. So I was doing that outside of work. At the same time, I was talking to groups of people inside work. Yeah, got to the point, and I felt kind of waves of support, and when I changed my name, I did that. You know, so I need to outside work, and there were a number of colleagues from work that you know had a little mini celebration with me at work, and you can imagine what a massive that made me. People offering that her support, like a coffee, a bit of a chat. Me, I identify as a woman, women come alongside me and say, yeah, I'm here. I just want to thought it would be quick.
Laura, I'm so sorry.
So yeah.
Sorry, Laura, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're really struggling to hear you. We might just try and turn our cameras off and see if that helps. I'm so sorry. Your story is so critical. We always want to make sure we're listening, but I am struggling to hear.
My
so try and turn our cameras off and just see if that helps. Okay, we'll see if that works.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
that's better.
Maybe that will help in terms of bandwidth.
Perfect. Yep, that works. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So I was just really saying about the personal support that I received when I came out as trans and transitioned from people, and I think that's something that we can all do, and just I think just by asking, trying to go beneath the immediate surface and having kind of conversations where we're asking people, you know, how they really are, and offering space for people to open up, just can make a massive difference to people. And so yeah, so I came out of work maybe 5-6 years ago. I was involved with starting a network at Tideway with some other LGBT plus people there, and then at Jacobs now, I'm involved with the PRISM network, which it's fantastic. It's like we don't it's not kind of it doesn't feel like just a professional network. Basically, it feels like a family. It feels like that people have come together and support each other, but are providing a place where people can come and feel supported, and one of the big things is that it's such an intersectional approach, really. So so I mean, we're lucky because it's a big organisation, and I know that not every organisation has the same level of resources, but being able to bring in as many different perspectives as we can. So we've got different we've got networks that like multicultural networks and disability networks and a women's network, and being able to join together with those networks and put on events and profile different people and their experiences is something that I think a lot of people have found really helpful. So I don't want to go on and say and go on. I just want to leave plenty of time for people to or to have a discussion, really, and for people to ask questions. Can I hand back to Danny? Danny, if you want to ask me any immediate questions, or to carry on.
Danny, you're on mute. Danny.
Thank you. I thought we'd learned these lessons by now after so many Zoom calls. Thank you for that. And thanks to Laura for your input there, and for your openness, and for agreeing to talk to us about your lived experience. I think we may have missed sort of some of the experiences that you had early on in the process when discussing sort of your decisions and your decision to come out and speak to your colleagues. I don't know if you'd be able to tell us a little bit about that, if that's what we missed sort of towards the beginning when we were having some connection issues at all.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Yeah. So I was saying really that it had been a real journey from because a lot of trans people know from an early age that they're trans, but that's not always the case. And I think that not having a combination of not having the role models when I was growing up to look and say, yeah, I can identify with that, and I think hiding from myself my true identity. It means it was only when I was into my 30s that it bubbled up, and I came out as trans to myself and my wife, and from there just worked on it and worked what I was going to do about it. And I now identify as non-binary as well. So I just want to emphasize as well that gender isn't a it's not simple. It's not a binary one or the other thing. That people identify in a whole range of ways, and in order to be fully inclusive, we need to kind of kind of put away our kind of assumptions that we grew up with, you know, about the gender binary, and well, which of these boxes are you going to fit into? So some trans people, it will be a case of you know, a transition and a change of name. You know, other people just want to be, you know, recognised, and that's where encouraging people to share their pronouns is it can be a simple thing that makes such a big difference, because there's quite a lot of people, and you'll find, you know, more and more people in the next generation coming into our industries, being non-binary, and having pronouns might be they them pronouns or other pronouns. So but to go back to my own story, I got to the point where it was a kind of crisis point, really, because I was afraid that you know, everything in my personal life was gonna fall apart if I transitioned. But I got to that crisis point and made the decision that I would, and started kind of building up from there, and communicating with others, and so as I mentioned, which you may not have been able to hear very well, in Tideway there wasn't a network, there weren't other transgender people, there was no real conversation about that, so I was kind of stepping out into the dark a little bit. So I'd say, just in terms of inclusion work, make sure that there's something there in terms of in terms of you know, some guidelines, something in the conversation, if there's a network to be including trans issues in the conversation.
Absolutely.
Just makes it so much easier. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. When you came out, when you were at Tideway, you said this was 5 or 6 years ago, I think. You were saying, were you surprised by the level of personal support that you got at that time? Was there a sort of a fear that you had built in surrounding coming out, that was then surprised, or you became surprised by the opposite reaction when you're speaking to colleagues at that point?
Yes. I was hopeful that I would be accepted, and that if there were negative reactions, that they'd be isolated. But really, you know, what I received was real warmth and support, and acceptance. And I think just the fact that I was able to suddenly be myself, bring that part of me that had been repressed for so long, really helped me in building friendships inside and outside of work since then. So overall, it's been just massively important for my mental health and well-being, to be able to come out and yeah, be myself.
Great. No, well, that's good to know that you got that support. And rather than me grilling you with my own questions from now and taking up the time, I'll move on just to talk a little bit about the Pride in Maritime network, and then encourage all of the participants in the call to add any questions and answers using the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen of the Zoom call. That would be questions for any of the panelists, including Laura and myself. So please do add those as we're going along. As Chrissie introduced at the beginning, my name is Danny McGowan, and I am the chair of the Pride in Maritime network for Maritime UK and Diversity in Maritime. I'm also the international organiser at Nautilus International, which is the trade union and professional association for maritime professionals working in the British, Dutch and Swiss shipping industries. We have 22,000 members worldwide from a large number of different nationalities. And I encourage you to look at nautilusint.org to look at the work that we're doing on both LGBT plus issues and wider maritime work as well. You can also find me and using my name via LinkedIn, and my Twitter handle is @Danny_Union. So I do encourage you all to make connections with me in those ways as well. So a little bit about the Pride in Maritime network. Like many of the other diversity networks, we were set up 18 months ago, just coming up to 18 months ago, right at the start of the pandemic, or in the height of the pandemic, actually, in May, in many areas. And since then, we've been working on building trust within our industry for LGBT plus people to be able to have these conversations. Slowly and surely, we've seen more and more people coming along to these kind of conversations, coming along to speak to us about LGBT plus matters. And we hope that we've now started to build that family that Laura reflected on from the PRISM network at Jacobs. We hope we've started to build that on a wider basis amongst the maritime industry as well. Most recently in London International Shipping Week, we had a Pride in Maritime roundtable. It was the second roundtable that we've had of employers and other organisations taking part in discussing how the maritime industry can be made more welcoming to LGBT plus people. That London International Shipping Week roundtable was a public event and is available to watch on the Maritime UK YouTube pages, so I would encourage you to do that. But some of the big themes that came out of the London International Shipping Week roundtable for the Pride in Maritime network were three. One of them was visibility, and just the fact that we're talking about these kind of matters in an open forum and with making ourselves available for people to speak to us is really important. When I think back to me joining the maritime industry coming up to 7 years ago, I couldn't see anything for LGBT plus people in our industry as a whole, and that worried me as a gay man, and worried me as someone who had previously been open about myself and about my family life with previous employers. It worried me that I'd have to go back into the closet that I had been in for much of my childhood, and worried me that I'd have to mask who I was, use all the kind of masking language that LGBT plus people are used to using, and masking behaviours, all these kind of things that people go through. So having this visible opportunity to work on these kind of matters, to work on improving the maritime industry for LGBT plus people is really important. Alongside that is the communication. So talking about what we're doing and sharing what we're doing with our colleagues and with our networks, our own personal networks. This kind of event is something that's, again, if it was happening 7 years ago when I joined Maritime and happening in the past when other people joined Maritime might have been something that helped people to bring their true selves to work. So please do make sure you share this kind of activity with your wider networks, with your friends and your family, your colleagues, because there might be one person that sees these kind of events taking place that suddenly realizes that there is a career for them in the maritime industry, and that it is one in which it is an industry in which they'll be able to continue to work and to be able to be their true selves in their professional lives as well. And then the third theme that we had from the Pride in Maritime Roundtable was on safety and security of LGBT plus people. That's both in their domestic work environments, but also in international work environments where people, either seafarers or shoreside workers who have to travel for their work in a global industry such as ours, have safety concerns about some of the regions that they might have to visit. That could be for different societal views, for different legal views. That we all know there are a large number of countries still where homosexuality is illegal, and so some people may have genuine fears about their safety in those kind of areas. So knowing that employees and other people working in our industry or using services within our industry, knowing that they have support of their employers and support of wider networks in providing advice and traveling to these areas, providing safety tips, these kind of things. Or even if somebody is so worried about going to a region that they would feel supported in speaking to their employer or to their network about why they wouldn't want to go to that region, if there was another way that the assignment could be accommodated, then that's a really important part of making this industry one where LGBT plus people do feel welcome. The important thing, and something again that Laura brought up, is having role models. And while I would love to have public role models within our industry, again, that safety and security area is one that worries me personally. And yes, I appreciate I've put my head well above the parapet in taking part in this kind of situation and this kind of event, and becoming the chair of the Pride in Maritime Network. But I also know that my employer, Nautilus, and the wider union family, the International Transport Workers Federation, support me, support what we're doing here at Maritime UK for seafarers and for other maritime professionals as well. But to be a role model, you don't necessarily have to put your head above the parapet. You can be a role model within your own environment, within your own family life, or within your own employment situation. And that can be just by, as Laura drew on, things like the highlighting your pronouns when you have the opportunity to do so, or displaying support for LGBT plus matters when other people are talking about them in the workplace, or even calling out bad behaviour, or calling out discrimination if it's witnessed, and not being afraid to do that. As I mentioned before, Nautilus has done a lot of work on these kind of things. We have a blog on our website, also on the Maritime UK website, about being an ally to LGBT plus people, and how you can be a good ally with some advice and some tips on that. And we also hope that people will come and use the Pride in Maritime Network to discuss these kind of matters openly. The Pride in Maritime Network itself is one for employees, representatives, I guess a kind of grassroots kind of situation for people to come and speak about these kind of matters in a safe space. But it's also there for allies who might want to learn a little bit more about the kind of situations that LGBT plus people might face in our industry, or the kind of support that they can give to people in our industry. It's a place where people can ask questions, and as long as those questions are not targeted with with malice. If somebody uses some incorrect terminology that they might want to be educated on, then we'll be happy to share that information and that guidance for people, so that they can then go back to their own environments and speak about how people can be supported, how the correct kind of language and terminology can be used as well. That's a really important thing for LGBT plus people. In some language can be outdated, some language can start to be reclaimed, and we've discussed that kind of all those kind of opinions within the Pride in Maritime network. One of them is an initial that will often be seen when talking about sexuality and gender identity, and that's the initial Q, which stands for the word queer, where some people see that as an offensive word, others see it as a word that they like to reclaim for the community, and one that they like to use as a descriptor for themselves or for others within their community. So it's something that we've discussed in our network. It's something that we'll continue to discuss, because language and terminology evolves, changes, and we'll always want to be the most supportive we can for the biggest group of our network attendees as well. So I think on that note, I'll wrap up from my side. Again, I'll encourage everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and also to use the Q&A function, questions and answers on the Zoom functionality, so that we can continue this conversation. But until then, I'll introduce Barbara. Thank Barbara for taking part. Barbara, I'll let you introduce yourself. You'll do a far better job than me.
Hi everyone. I think everybody is frightened to pronounce my name, my surname. My name is Barbara Buczek. I'm a former CCO at the Port of Dover and currently transiting to a new business where hopefully I'll be able to support the initiative started by Diversity in Maritime UK. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, delighted to be part of this conversation, and delighted that we have some people who hopefully will benefit from the dialogue that has been put on the agenda of Maritime World by Maritime UK. And I'm very delighted also to have started with this particular initiative when it was Women in Maritime, and it then moved to Diversity in Maritime, which I think is very important, because inclusion does not necessarily mean just women. It's very much about LGBTQ and other people within the industry that may feel a little bit excluded. I have to say, I have to give kudos to my former employer, Port of Dover, because it was an environment that I felt was very, very inclusive. And I probably have been a little bit blindsided to the issues that were in the wider industry, because we were so well diverse within our own business. And I'm delighted that we could have heard the story of Laura today, because I have seen this story on the other side, i.e. being a person who welcomed people who were transiting whilst they were in employment. And I think this is why Chrissie has invited me to speak to you today a little bit, because it's a slightly different perspective. And I want to talk to you about this from a perspective of people who may get it wrong, and the getting it wrong does not necessarily mean malice. It means just that it's new and different, and you may have no experience in dealing with certain situations. And we mustn't be afraid to get it wrong, as long as there was no malice, and as long as we learn from the experience. And port industry that I represent is or has been historically very much male dominated, and especially the quay side, the cargo side, can be what I would refer to as very much a butch, tough men industry. And in that particular terminal, I had a privilege to work with a person wanting to transit. And I have to say that very proudly, actually, and it probably links to Laura's experience, surprisingly, probably, it was a very welcoming environment. So a person that wanted to transit from being male to being a female probably did not anticipate that actually the support will come from a lot of her colleagues who initially could be seen as stuck in their ways. Surprisingly as well, it was the female colleagues that made it a little bit more difficult. And it's the good old story of toilets and sharing facilities. And that was something that I was completely surprised by. But again, we went through it. So going back a little bit, step back a little bit in terms of building policies. We didn't have a particular policy, simply because we at that time felt very much that it was included in one of the characteristics. So therefore, by default, you should not discriminate. When we started the process of helping one of our colleagues to transit, I became aware of some potential issues, and I think it very much starts with everybody, but needs to be highlighted by leaders of particular business that it's not on. So what we did is I sent letters, personal letters from myself to every employee, and said that if I would become aware of any malice towards that particular person, individual, then they will deal with me and it will be instantaneous dismissal. And I think you have to take sometimes really hard stands on those matters and tell people that it's very serious and that the business will not approve or put up with any discrimination towards a person that is just going through something that is particularly difficult for them at that time, and we shouldn't be adding, and it's normal and it's their choice. And I have to say the colleagues were extremely supportive, and Laura is also correct in her, well, it's not for me to say whether she's correct or not, but we had a similar experience with some mental health, and the business provided support, and I'm very proud to say that the business did that, or I shouldn't be probably even proud, it should be a normal thing again. But what I am proud about is that we provided a safe space for a person to transit, and that person is still with us or with that particular business and thriving, and it was a safe space for her to continue with employment in the area that she liked, an environment that she thrived in. And I think the point of the toilets, I'll give you an example of what we did. We were actually at that time transiting from one site to another. And in one side, we had the traditional male and female toilets, the good old style. And having lived through the experience, we just decided that a new side, there won't be any division, it'll be transgender toilets. And it's a change that some people have to cope with. But again, it takes away all the ambiguities, and it provided a more inclusive space for everybody, that you didn't have to even ask yourself a question, where you're heading and where you're going. So small changes like this within the business, I think, are very important. Helping people feel more comfortable in their space. But again, going back to that, not stopping yourself from starting a conversation with the fear of getting it wrong is something that we need to work on, and we've seen that this week with the health secretary potentially getting himself in hot water with certain language. Yes, maybe he got it wrong, but what I'm pleased to see is that it started a conversation. There was an excellent BBC Radio 4 debate on this matter, on trans matter, and I think we need to be able to give people an opportunity to learn. Because, as Danny said, some of the vocabulary may need time to catch up, and we may need to help people educate themselves a little bit better on what's appropriate and what isn't, and that applies to me and everybody in the industry. So again, I would never ever claim to be an alpha and omega of the matters, certainly not. But I think this was what I wanted to share with you, a little bit of practical experience of how you can deal with it in business, a life situation, operational area. And I will hand over back to I'll hand over back to Chrissie.
Thanks so much, Barbara. Just want to say, obviously, a huge thank you. We're going to kind of move into the Q&A section now. I can't see any Q&As yet come in from the virtual audience. If anyone does have any questions, please do feel free to put those in. I'm going to hand back to Danny now. Laura, I don't know if you want to try turning on your camera again and we can just see if that works. It really would be lovely to see you, and joys of tech when it works and when it doesn't work. But if it doesn't, then we'll all turn our cameras off again just to make sure we're all work with our bandwidths. Okay, over to you, Danny.
Thanks very much, Chrissie, and thanks, Barbara, for telling us about what you went through and how you were able to support colleagues and others with your employer. One of the things that I picked up on a lot there, or one phrase that you used, is about helping people to feel comfortable at work, and that's something that really resonates with me. Just on that, feeling comfortable at work, because what I don't want to do is to portray LGBT plus people as victims in life as a whole, because that would be wrong to do that. However, LGBT plus people do go through a lot of experiences throughout their life where they are made to feel uncomfortable, where they feel that they can't be themselves at work, where they feel that they can't talk about their family lives, right through to situations where they experience violence, or even violence leading then to death, which is clearly the sort of the worst kind of situation to get into. And just for somebody being able to feel comfortable at work is something that would make such a big difference to so many people, and something that very simple actions taken by employers, taken by industry, can achieve very quickly, in my opinion, at least. And I hope that from having these kind of conversations, from listening to these kind of shared experiences from Laura in her situation, and from Barbara, from Caitlin, from others, I hope that employers and other organisations will start to be able to introduce policies, perhaps, where these kind of people feel free to have these kind of conversations, and people don't have to worry about being made to feel uncomfortable in their workplace. Now, there's a question in the question and answer function for Barbara. It's from Ali, and the question is, when you move forward with non-gender based toilets at your new site, how did you resolve objection or handle any opposition to this?
Unmute. Thank you very much for this question, Ali. Interestingly, again, the main issue came from women, and that was a big surprise to me. So again, this goes back to my point about not being afraid to get it wrong. I always find that people are just simply afraid of change, and something that they are not normally used to. And for example, I think throughout our lives we all have been used to this we were always taught this very simple division, male, female, and you're going here, you're going there, you're wearing blue, you're wearing pink. It's as simple as that. I think it's ingrained in us right from the moment we're born, and it's proven with even the clothes that are there available for purchase for children. So I commend, for example, John Lewis for doing non-gender specific clothing, and I think that's great development in the industry. How have I dealt with it? I think you just have to help those people to come to terms with the fact that the world is moving on, and stand by the choices that you've made. We were faced with a bit of an issue at that time with providing, changing our decision on the toilets that we've provided, and we stuck by it. And sometimes you just, it might not be a popular what I'll say, but sometimes you just have to stick by your choices and by what you believe in. And this is what we decided to do. And we just persevered with those toilets. And after a few weeks, it all fell into place and everybody felt comfortable utilizing the facilities that were provided. It was really, I would say it was really that simple. It wasn't simple, but you just have to sometimes let people cope with the new environment that they're in. If that means that they have to be in a toilet or in the facilities used by all genders.
Thanks, Barbara. That's a very, very useful point there. And I think in society as a whole, and certainly within a lot of media, we've seen recently almost a fixation on this kind of issue, whereas in reality, for most people, it should be a non-issue. Of it's almost an obsession that seems to get the headlines and seems to grab people's attention, where in reality it's not something that should matter to most people at all. Laura, there's a question in the Q&A that I'll just expand upon a little bit and just talk about mixed facilities as a whole, and in the male-based environment of construction, major infrastructure that you're in, or male-dominated environment, sorry. Were there any issues that you faced with mixed facilities, or any concerns that you faced or that you had to address either with your employer or to come to terms with yourself to be able to again be comfortable at work?
Yeah, I have to caveat that I've worked primarily in office-based environments rather than out in kind of site-based environments that I'm aware that a lot of people in the maritime industry will be in. So possibly a slightly different context. But I thought what Barbara said was great, and that's that you know, if we can introduce gender neutral facilities, either all gender neutral facilities, or at least a good viable gender neutral option alongside male and female facilities, then that's great and really valuable. As I say, gender isn't binary. I've had other trans friends who really struggle. Which of these binary options for facilities should I go? And I'm really not comfortable with either of these options. So that's great. So most of the times I use the women's facilities, and I've personally not had a problem. I think early on in my transition, probably some people may have contacted HR, and they had those conversations with that people, similar to Barbara, what Barbara described, and thankfully resolved that without me ever having to know about it. So I could go merrily along, actually just doing my job and having one less thing to worry about. Yeah, so I while I'm on the microphone, I just wanted to say as well something about changing the subject a bit, but something about allyship that Danny was talking about, and I just want to really emphasize, because sometimes in kind of LGBT plus networks, it's like, okay, we've got LGBT plus people here and we've got allies over here, and I just want to say it's not like that. That all of us, absolutely all of us, can be allies, because there's not just one LGBT plus experience. There's a whole rainbow of experiences, and we're never going to understand all those experiences from our own personal experience. So I think it's great if we're all kind of get into the mindset of being allies. And yeah, I'm reading a book at the moment, for example, called Hood Feminism. So it's like feminism from a black woman from the hood in America, and just learning, you know, so much about that perspective, which is so different to mine, but what's really what really matters to other people, and so hopefully be able to learn more and be able to be an ally to other groups. And final thing that came to me while other people were talking is if there are any leaders of organisations here having the support for this inclusion work, and particularly LGBT plus inclusion right from the top of an organisation, is massive. And I know that's one of the things that's made such a big difference in Jacobs is having the big bosses support, having executive sponsor for the network, and even hearing messages from the CEO in support of the work that we're doing as the network. Sorry, Danny, various tangents. Back to you.
Please don't apologise. I'd love to hear all of these kind of aspects. Is so important for the whole conversation, and you're absolutely right on the having that visible leadership is something that comes up so often throughout our themes. Barbara, I'll hand over to you. Please go ahead.
It's just a question from me to you, Danny, and to Laura as well. Do you see improvement over the years? Have you seen improvement? Do you think that we're heading into a right direction, or do you think that we're stuck? And if you don't see improvement, what is the single thing that would make the biggest change in the environment that you operate within?
Laura, do you wish to go first, or I'm happy to?
I'm seeing a massive improvement over the last 10 years. It's really in, you know, I'm talking from a specific context, you know, in the UK, but I think internationally as to some extent as well, particularly around transgender issues and the idea of gender as a spectrum. Feels to me like a conversation that's a lot more open now, and people are having that conversation and developing that greater understanding, and yeah, so I think there's progress, but I also think there's a lot of pushback at the moment, you know, in some women's groups, kind of some sectors of feminism. There's quite a kind of anti-trans narrative happening, which and we've seen it with some of what's been happening with the government and the proposed pushback on the proposed reforms recently as well. So it is a bit of a mixed picture, but I'm hopeful that change is unstoppable. What do you think, Danny?
Absolutely, definitely change is unstoppable, and with Diversity in Maritime UK and the Diversity Task Force, good luck trying to stop us on this kind of work. I'd say to anyone. Barbara, on your question of improvement, I think within our industry there has absolutely been improvement. The fact that when I relate it back to my employment with Nautilus, for example, that was my entry into the maritime industry was 7 years ago. As you say, as I said, I saw nothing for LGBT plus people. There was nothing visible at that point that made me feel at home in our industry. And then slowly the work that we've done with Nautilus, opening up the first way that we wanted to do it was to open up a young maritime professionals forum to discuss diversity. So those aged 35 and under was where we first had the conversation. And by opening up that area and seeing that more and more LGBT plus people were coming to speak about situations they faced, or just coming to the network, but from the basis of being LGBT plus and happening to be young at that point as well, and then seeing the support of Nautilus changing, and the support and the backing that Nautilus gave, with that kind of just by having the conversation within our membership, by attending events such as Pride in London. Now, fighting for and struggling for LGBT plus rights is more than waving a rainbow flag during Pride Month, and more than attending Pride in London or any kind of Pride event. But the fact that we were doing that at Nautilus, and we were taking members with us fairly early on in our conversation, made a big impact on what we were doing in the wider industry, and had a bigger impact than just 10 people coming along to our first Pride event, for example, in 2016. Then seeing more people coming along year on year up until 2019, the last Pride event that we could attend in person, where we had 50 people attending that, was just was a massive step change for me, and seeing the support we had from other parts of the industry, from employers, from the International Transport Workers Federation, who were attending alongside Nautilus as well, and the General Secretary of Nautilus attending as well, and making sure that he was visible as our Chief Executive, our General Secretary, as we said earlier. So there has been improvement in our industry, and but there remains a lot of space for improvement as well. Having had that conversation within Nautilus, having opened up the conversation to LGBT plus people as well, making sure that they feel welcome and comfortable, we've then seen some of those people who have had those conversations joining our governing body, the Council of Nautilus, as well as lay members, and that's been a really important step, and a really visible step of how things have improved for me, or how I've seen improvements take place. Alongside that, there is of course the changing situation globally, changing situation in society, that Laura touched on, and various areas being quite vocally anti-trans, and quite vocally anti-LGBT plus. Seen increased violence in the UK, sadly, on against LGBT plus people and against others. We've seen changes in other countries in the world which had good rights, or had okay rights, and then we've seen anti-LGBT laws being implemented. So some of those are concerns that we face as LGBT plus people as a community, but we also face as an industry when we're looking at a global community of workers and people that we send worldwide on either as seafarers or as international workers, shoreside workers as well. Barbara, go ahead.
Hi. Coming from a country, and for those who don't know, I'm from Poland, seeing what's going on in Poland at the moment with LGBTQ exclusion zones, that's something that massively saddens me. But I sometimes think this is a sign of people pushing against progress that is being made. And what I see is great in Poland, for example, at the moment, is the young the younger generation pushing against what is happening. So I have a lot of hope in the younger generation for whom some of the subject matters that we're discussing is no longer an issue, because they see that as a complete normal thing and part of the society. And I think this is great. But I think we also mustn't forget that change takes time, as annoying as it is. And looking at it from a female perspective, we've been talking about feminism and certain progress for women for so many years, and sometimes it feels like very little progress has been made in certain areas. But then you have to go back to what our mothers had to, how they've lived, and the stories that I even hear of my female colleagues, how it used to be before I joined the industry, shows me that actually it might be a small progress, but it's massive, and it's proving invaluable to the environment that I was able to join. Can I just pick up on the questions and comments made by Ali in the Q&A section? The older one, Ali, where you make a statement, a thought. I fully agree with you. I think my experience of us being able to provide fully gender-neutral toilets and facilities in the area where that I was dealing with and I was looking after at that time, I was very lucky that we were transiting to completely new facilities. So, and I'm very glad that we've made a move to completely bite the bullet and go with it. But equally, as I say, I was very lucky that it was brand new facilities, and we were able to start with a blank sheet of paper when we were designing the terminal. Now, there are lots of assets in our industry, both on water, so ships, and some of the terminals, where it would require some infrastructure changes that may be a little bit more difficult when those assets are still in operation and before they will be phased out. But even putting some toilets, taking sections out of the existing toilets and making them gender neutral, even if it's just one toilet on board, I think and I feel would make a difference. But again, I think we need to remember that some people looking after those assets are maybe not so well active in the conversations that are required to be brought to the attention. So maybe some people just don't think about it and don't notice it, sadly. So yes, I think it's a statement. And Ali, if you were to be in all those conversations that we've been having as diversity in Maritime, somehow we always come back to the point of toilets and bins. And it's sad and funny in a way that we're still discussing those very, very basic facilities. So that's my comment. I haven't read your second one, so I'll hand over to someone else whilst we're reading the next comment from Ali. And Ali, thank you very much for being so active. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Barbara. And Chrissie, I wonder if I can ask you on, we're talking about leaders and support for trans people and for LGBT plus people. How do you have a question and from that kind of perspective that you want to ask the panelists? Is something you wanted to bring in and to discuss?
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, that'd be great. Really, I've been absolutely loving the conversation. I've been definitely scribbling notes here. Laura, I'm definitely going to be checking out that book, Hood. We have a book club. I think it's going to be absolutely fabulous, so it's going on my reading list. And I guess I completely agree with Barbara that change does take time. And it really to be inclusive as a movement, it's changing each day and it's really being adaptable to that. So I completely agree. And Laura, your point really resonates about everybody is an ally. Everybody has got a lived experience and a different lived experience, and it's that unique lived experience that helps us to be an ally to others. So I love that point. And just kind of moving back, obviously, to this kind of the importance of visible leaders and the support of visible leaders. It's something we've been really trying to discuss through Diversity in Maritime. And when we launched the Mental Health Pledge, we made a really kind of a big step forward where we asked the signatories of the pledge to be a CEO or a CFO and to actually publicly sign the online document and to share their signature, their name in a social media post as well. And I think that's really important, but how do we take it that next step forward? And Laura, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you first. If you've got any advice for what we could do at Diversity in Maritime through our networks to kind of empower more leaders to be visible in their support. You talk about, obviously, Jacob's had that fabulous visible leaders. What could we do in Maritime? What can we learn from you and from Jacob's?
I think provide training. I think there's some great organisations, and we're providing some of that at the moment, which I can kind of find out, you know, contacts of organisations that, but there's several out there that provide ally training to leaders, and so that's really my main thought on that, really, is that provide that opportunity for leaders to be able to take a step back and learn something about it from you know, from people that are that have got those diverse experiences, and I think that can be done as well, maybe through a kind of reverse mentoring relationship. Sometimes, if leaders can establish a reverse mentoring relationship with somebody with a different perspective from them, that can be a really mutually beneficial thing as well.
Wonderful, thank you. I told you earlier about training. If you're happy to send me over some of those contacts, that'd be great, and we'll share that out through the networks, if that's all right, and include that on our toolkits. I find that reverse mentoring really interesting as well. It's certainly something we're starting to hear more and more about. We're going to be launching a new video podcast series very soon, which is kind of the first step, I guess, of that around storytelling, where we're actually going to get somebody junior in their organisations to interview somebody at executive level to talk about, okay, well, what are the tips and tricks that you can share that visible leadership? So Laura, if you're comfortable, I want to share some of those videos with you and get your thoughts on those, and maybe it's something we can even do in collaboration with you as well. So thank you. I think they're all really fabulous points that we'll take on board. Barbara, I'm going to move to you, because obviously you were on executive, and you're continuing to be on executive, hopefully, where you're moving to next. But I'd love to get your thoughts on how we can empower other executives to get on board with this.
I think Laura's point on training is superbly important, and the reverse mentoring, I have not thought about that, so thanks for that, Laura, because I think a lot of, I said that before, a lot of people are, for a lot of people, this is a new subject matter, and quite often, and I'm not defending anyone, and I'm not putting, it's the same conversation as there is with women, that we've always asked women to be careful, for example, how they walk the streets. It's not that. And I'm not advocating for that. I'm not saying that it's the LGBTQ and the women that have to take it in their hands to make the change and to defend people who may be doing something wrong. But quite often there isn't any malice. It's just simply being sometimes even mortified to start the subject matter in order not to offend anyone. And I have that experience with myself by simply going with the change of the toilet and then realizing that I offended the other group in the organization without ever even thinking about it. Didn't even occur to me. So I think that training, that point that Dani mentioned about the vocabulary changing, that's what is important is so vital, because some people just simply do not have understanding of it. So I think that's, and the reverse mentoring point from Laura is really important. But I think it's just so important also that it's not going to become a like a token item or waving the rainbow flag. You have to mean it. You have to want people to be included. But I think that, and we've said and we've talked about it so much, that when the organization is diverse, it's a huge benefit. And when you have different views that are around the table, the benefit to the organization on all sorts of levels is immense, and it's been proven. We just have to get on with it. Laura, just for your point, there is a question from Ali for you in Q&A. If you can have a look at it, because I think it's quite an important one and specific to you.
Yeah, I read that. Thanks, Ali. Yeah, and I like the question. Blokey environments, yeah, which I've had to kind of deal with as well for most of my life. I actually went to a single-sex school, a boys' school, so which I survived, but it wasn't particularly pleasant from the perspective of very kind of you know, over kind of masculine discourses and conversations, and even at work, I in terms of social dues, you know, so often a group of guys will be talking about something really stereotypically blokey, but you know, when there's too much of that, it really is, it's exclusionary really, and it's not just exclusionary, you know, to trans people, or even just or even exclusionary to women. You know, not all men feel included by those stereotypically blokey conversations. So I think it's really a wider question than supporting people coming out as trans. It really is a wider culture change in terms of just bringing in other perspectives to the conversation, and I think anyone can do that, and can start kind of speaking up in ways that are not your typical, haven't been typically part of that discourse or culture or conversation in that environment. You know, I've kind of felt again and again that that, you know, it's kind of easy to keep your head down and not say something that you think might get a negative reaction, but you know, when you actually do speak up and actually use your voice, it quite often it can really open up a lot of things and really inspire other people to actually use their voices as well, and to bring their whole selves to the conversation, or to the environment. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, thank you, Laura. And I mean, just to go into the Chrissie's point on what leaders can do to support LGBT plus people in our industry, is first of all, come along to the roundtables that we're organising. Come and sit with us, be part of that conversation, and evidence your proactivity, because it might feel like some of these, or it might feel like making your own organisation welcoming for LGBT plus people, it might feel like a daunting task. But come along and be part of that conversation with Diversity in Maritime, with the Pride in Maritime Network, and with other employers and other organisations in the industry, and hopefully we'll be able to make it an easier task for everyone from the employer, from the sort of the higher level perspective. But alongside that, the leaders, I would also ask them to encourage LGBT plus people and allies to attend our Pride in Maritime networks and to provide employees with the facilities to be able to do that, including the time to be able to do that if it's not something that an employee feels that they want to ask for, perhaps. So please just encourage people to have this conversation, encourage people to be open, and hopefully those that are also allies will be able to take part in those conversations as well and see how they can best support people when they're coming out, when they're talking about their home lives at work as well. And lastly, for leaders, I would also ask them to encourage their organisations and their boards, etc., to support the Pride in Maritime Day that we're trying to establish, which for 2022 will be on the 28th of February. And we really hope that we can get leaders, organisations, charities, unions, everyone involved in that day, to make it stand out as a day within maritime that LGBT plus people know that they can be welcome and that they can have long and successful careers in our industry. So I hope that answers some of the questions, and thank you to Ali for his input in using the question and answer field, and I hope that Ali again will continue his conversation with us in the Pride in Maritime network as well. Chrissie, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And I can see you just put another one in regards to training. We'll definitely take that on board, and we'll discuss that. But again, when we welcome to come to the network, we need to discuss that as well, because training is something we need to kind of take through to all our networks. So we will wrap up today. A huge thank you to Barbara, Caitlin, Danny, and Laura for really kind of sharing your experiences and your ideas today. I'm immensely grateful, because it's really thanks to our fabulous advocates, like our panelists today, we've been able to progress the conversations within diversity and maritime. And kind of since London International Shipping Week, we're really kind of starting this dialogue of, it's really important to obviously understand what we can do better in maritime, but we've got to stop talking to ourselves as well. We need to kind of share our learnings and listen to other similar sectors, to share our wins, but also to share the things that haven't worked. And it's so important that we continue to do that. We do encourage everybody to join our next Inclusion Week webinar, which is going to be on Thursday, which will be discussing organisational change with the British Ports Association. We've got some fabulous speakers coming along to that. Also, all of our networks meet in the next fortnight. And again, we warmly welcome you to attend those. Please do share your involvement today. Get on Twitter or LinkedIn, tag us in, and we will be sharing this recording. But for me, again, a huge thank you to Laura, Danny, Barbara, and Caitlin. We'll certainly take all the points on board and continue these discussions. So thank you, and I'm going to close the webinar. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye.